swimming all over my house. Imagine a whole house built without footings that go down. That's what Jesus says your life is like. If you're hearing the words and putting on the show, you can say all the right words. Lord, 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 yes, Lord, yes, Lord. Oh, it looks good. But there's no foundation. And you're in for a crash. It may look good, but when those sands shift and the storms come, the difficulties come, the job gets lost, the kid gets sick, the car breaks down, times get tough, our spiritual lives are just toast. Why? Because we aren't interested in Him being Lord. We're interested in going to heaven. Oh, who isn't? Everybody wants to go to heaven. But who wants to really obey Him? Who wants to really take this sermon that is so weird, so against our normal lives, and really apply that? Who wants to really be obedient to that? Somebody comes up and steals your car down in Milwaukee, and Jesus says, hey, dude, you need some cash too? Do we really want to live like that? Do you? Do you really want to live by the values that Christ talks about here? Jesus says if you want to hear the words and not do anything about it, then your life, if Jesus was preaching this message today, he'd say, your life is like a 40-foot tall, beautiful concrete pillar. Part of an $800 million highway development program that just looks so good, and it's so wonderful, and they had this great big opening program for it, and they celebrated how it was done ahead of schedule, and it's the largest project ever done in the state of Wisconsin. And then less than 2 years later, cracks right there in the top of the pillar. It's going to crumble. They had to close the highway. 15,000 cars a day drive on top of that thing, and they are sure, they know that it's not going to hold it up. And so they closed the thing. I mean, like now, they closed that thing. Why? Because the people who built it didn't put enough rebar inside. And there's all these little cracks forming in the concrete, and it's all crumbling. And so they got to tear it down. And they got to rebuild it. And they got to put steel in the spine of that pillar. They got to put unbending, unyielding, solid material in there to hold it up. Jesus says, man, you want to be my disciple? You want to follow after me? Then you got to be somebody who has steel in your life. You got to be somebody who's got a solid foundation. You got to be somebody who's got rigid, unbending principles and values that are godly, that are guiding your life. Because if you don't, things are going to crumble. And they're not only going to crumble in this life. Jesus says there's going to come a day that's worse than the worst day. Last week, during the second half of the Packer game, the third string guys were in there playing. And I turned to Carol and I said, you know, for a lot of these guys, for some of these guys that are out there on TV right now wearing the Packer uniforms and doing their thing, this is the last time they're going to play football. They've probably played football since they were 10 years old, maybe younger. They've been in Pee Wee. They played in junior high. They played in high school. I guarantee you they got a scholarship to college. They played all through that. They get asked to come to training camp. Football has been a big part of these guys' lives, and we're watching on the TV right now probably the last game a lot of these guys will ever play. Because, I mean, they're good, and they're talented, but they're just not going to make the team. 22 of those guys are going to get cut. They're not going to be invited to stay. Yesterday, 22 men got called into Mike McCarthy's office, and they were told that while they were good players and they had some talent, they simply hadn't made it. Some of those guys probably suspected that they were going to get cut. They could probably read the press and see the writing on the wall, if you will, that it wasn't going to work. But then I'm sure that there were some guys who got that call and they were just absolutely blown away. I mean, they were sure they were going to make it. They've always made it. They've always been, you know, the pride of town and the coach's favorite. And in college, they did great. And I mean, for crying out loud, they got asked to be on the Packers. And they get called in and boom, like a ton of bricks. The guy says, dude, I'm sorry, but this young kid came in here and quite frankly outplayed you. You're not going to make it. Of course, they're all going to be disappointed. But it's not the end of the world for them. These guys will go back to their families and they'll go back and pick up jobs, school teachers, truck drivers, working at Piggly Wiggly, whatever they do. They're really big bad guys. And that's where the analogy breaks down. Because in the football case, those guys' life goes on. They can actually maybe do something even better than football. Not so in this story from Jesus. Because if you get cut from God's squad, there's nowhere else to go. Life does not go on. You know what goes on? Death goes on. Death goes on. Somebody who dies in this world without Jesus as their Lord, somebody who goes there and stands before the Lord on that day and says, Lord, Lord, I called you Lord. I prophesied in your name. I cast out demons in your name. And Jesus says, I never knew you. Life doesn't go on. Death goes on. For eternity. Death, hopelessness, destruction for all eternity. Never ending. Never any hope of relief. Death goes on. And if yesterday was the worst time of the year for the players that got cut from the team, man, the day that Jesus is describing here is the worst day in all time. Because the consequences of that cut are infinite and eternal. There's no hope. So today is the day when we need to do some evaluation.